And it looks like it's starting to slow in terms of the number of people joining. So with that, I would like to introduce myself and thank everybody for joining our webinar today. My name is Allan Dawe. I'm joining you from snowy Vancouver today, and joined by my colleague Nikolas Lopez in Toronto. And today we're going to be doing the first webinar of Leger's 2022 youth study. And our focus today is to share some insights about the finances of millennials and Gen Z. This will be followed in the coming weeks by 2 additional webinars covering their attitudes about employment and their perceptions about the future. More details will be shared at the end of the presentation about those webinars. And I would also note that you can post questions in the box below, and we'll do our best to address them all at the end of the webinar. There also will be a full report shared following all of these webinars that we're doing with more insights within there. But again, today we'll focus on finance, and in particular, we'll be going over 5 key learnings, starting with economic pessimism around finances, how millennials and Gen Z are reacting to inflation, who they're looking to for financial advice and who they're not, how their habits have changed with regards to the types of financial products they're using, and lastly, how their different attitudes and behaviors can be segmented into unique personas. So where did all these insights come from? You might be wondering. Well, Leger conducted a robust study of over 3,000 respondents, over 2,000 millennials and over 1,000 Gen Z, or I don't know if I can call them Gen Zennials. For those who are like me, when I look at these, just a reminder that the definition of millennials and Gen Z covers those age up to 26, 15 to 26 generally, while the millennials we're reporting on are currently age 27 to 39 years old. The sample itself was balanced across Canada, including a mix of English and French speakers, different education levels, homeowner statuses, ethnicities, and with so much data, there's a lot of possibilities for segmenting the results. Some of it might be mentioned in this presentation, and others will likely be shown in the full report that you'll be receiving following the conclusion of all 3 webinar events. So without much further ado, I'd like to start by talking about economic pessimism. We all know the past couple of years have been challenging, and it's not likely to get easier for some. If we move to the next slide, we see that more millennials and Gen Z are saying that their personal finances are in poor shape than good shape. And this is most pronounced amongst older millennials, where 32% are saying that their finances are in poor shape, as well as renters, 37% saying their personal finances are poor. Looking forward to 2023, there is pessimism around Canada's economy. Nearly 3/4 do not believe that Canada's economy will improve, which could impact their personal finances as well. And this represents a significant shift from their perspective going into 2022. So again, the outlook that they have is a little bit more pessimistic than they've had it even previously. With the future being perceived as uncertain or in a negative light, we see that just under a third of millennials and Gen Z are not saving money because they can't project themselves in the future. Even more are worried that they're going to be the last generation that can live comfortably. And with this uncertainty around the future, many are wanting to have a slower pace of life and are trying to be more present at the moment because the future to them is more uncertain than ever. And we see that in particular amongst the 27 to 39-year-olds who are most worried about the future. If we move to the next slide, we asked about what kind of savings and investments people are making. And this is in the context of 24% are not making investments at all. They're not able to. Amongst those who are, they are trying to prepare for their future and for financial security, but many are having struggles doing so. There's less saving for for uh, things like travel. Fewer are able to save to buy for a house. And the idea of financial freedom is elusive to some. And then we have the idea of inflation, and we know that it's very topical with the inflation in June reaching 8.1%, which has softened, I think last month to 6.9%. We're seeing some of the highest levels of inflation since the early 80s when millennials were first being born. With the cost of groceries, housing, transportation having increased, it's forcing them to change some of their habits and lifestyle. In particular, their ability to save money. We see that being the top piece, that their area where they're having to change their behavior, followed by the food they're consuming, their ability to go out, their ability to travel. And then when we look down there, down the list here, we see that there's a large proportion, 2 in 5, saying that it's impacting their ability to make regular payments to their credit card or bills and being able to pay rent or mortgage. When we look at how worried they are about their finances, we see that just under half say that they're living paycheck to paycheck. And this is more prominent among millennials, and we saw higher concern amongst those who are older. We also see more renters saying that they're living paycheck to paycheck, and women who are saying that. 1/3 of millennials and Gen Zennials say that they have less than $1,000 in savings, and a similar proportion say that they're not able to pay for all their expenses without going further into debt. Well, 32%, only 32% say that they are not afraid of running out of money. So that represents a large proportion who are worried. The idea of finances is top of mind throughout. On a day-to-day basis, there is worry. And it's apparent in the data that those who are renters generally have less savings and are more likely to be living paycheck to paycheck. We see on the right here that about just over 3/4 are saying that they can't afford to buy property, and over 2/3 said that they don't think they'll be able to in the next few years. Their rent is taking up a big proportion of their expenditures, and 40% have needed help at some point to be able to pay their rent. And this doesn't mean that tenants are the only ones feeling the effects of inflation. Nearly 1 in 5 Gen Z and millennial homeowners say that they have had to have help on their mortgage at some point. And over twice as many say that their mortgage takes up too much of their expenses and that their mortgage is too high compared to their salary. And with that, I'll pass it over to Nikolas to share some further learnings.
Thanks, Allan, for kind of providing that context there in the lead up to these next few sections. So I want to kind of talk about trust in institutions. And, this is, another year where we're doing the youth study, and we've seen kind of in previous years a decline in trust with some key institutions. And I think, the financial sector, financial institutions aren't really immune to kind of this overall trend. And we'll get into that and kind of unpack kind of what we're seeing in the data, specifically when it comes to young people. But first, I want to start us off when we think about kind of who young people are going to as a confidant in their kind of financial decision-making process. And we ask kind of a question here about, who primarily advises you. And it's interesting to see kind of the split here between both the Gen Z, so that younger cohort, and millennials in terms of who they're going to. So Gen Z, overwhelmingly more likely to be going to their parent. for advice and financial decision making. And that isn't necessarily surprising, right? Think about what you might use to interact with a bank or financial institution when you were younger. It might be just, a simple savings account, a checking account, getting your first debit card set up, maybe dealing with, student loan applications. Very limited in terms of kind of complex financial or bigger financial decisions that you might be making. As this cohort gets a little bit older, when we talk about the millennials, moving to a life partner. So now you're a little bit more independent. You're kind of figuring life out on your own. You might have, a spouse or a partner that you're trying to build a life together with. So that becomes more of an important person in your life in terms of making key financial decisions. As well, this is where that financial advisor might come in. And certainly there's, when I look at this data, I think, there's an opportunity for financial institutions to kind of grow that role as kind of the advisor in the life of millennials and Gen Z folks here. One question I did also, we asked here is, do you think you have enough financial knowledge to make good decisions about your money? And some of the data here shows, 54% kind of feel like they do. But there's still a significant proportion that either don't know or, outright say, yeah, I don't know enough to make kind of good decisions about your money. And what's interesting is kind of the groups here that are significantly more likely to say that, they just don't have enough financial knowledge. Women more so, and again, that younger cohort, that 20 to 29-year-old group, the one that's more likely to be going to their parent for financial advice rather than a financial advisor. So when we couple that kind of with what we saw in the last slide, there's significant opportunity here to for financial advisors and financial institutions to play a bigger role in the decision making among young Canadians. And I want to circle back to that question of trust. We asked a wide variety here on screen of different institutions and the degree to which they trust those institutions. Banks are quite high up there, 60% of Gen Z, 53% of millennials saying that they trust banks, which is good. But what's interesting is kind of the trend here. As folks get older in that millennial cohort, that trust from almost all institutions kind of declines a little bit. So, government, 43% versus 36% as an example. The justice system, 49 versus 44. Banks, 60 versus 53. And I think what we're seeing here is that as you grow older, there's more, touch points that you might have with these institutions, especially banks. Obviously, a millennial is more likely to be maybe taking out a car loan, be more likely to be in that life stage where they're applying for a mortgage for a home they might have just bought. So they have more of a reason to interact with banks, and those interactions obviously kind of inform their perception around the institution. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. While these scores are kind of, high for banks, it's, that wane that we're seeing between both Gen Z and millennials kind of might be related to kind of the interactions that they're having with banks. So what can financial institutions do? I think, this is kind of where there's a significant opportunity. I think financial institutions need to start seeing themselves less as kind of a service provider among millennials, whether that be, being their first credit card, being their first bank account, and position themselves as a partner in the success of young people financially. So some of the things that they thought that financial institutions could do more on, teaching them financial skills. We hear about it a lot, about how there's a lack of financial education in the public school system. This is a significant opportunity for financial institutions to move in. Increasing the return on investments or giving them new investment opportunities. So again, that element about assisting them in their financial success, whether that be through returns or whether that be through, active advice. Checking in with you to be there for you, 52%. They want to see kind of financial institutions be a partner in their life, be a partner in their own success. And I really think that aspect and that element will really help financial institutions, regrow some of that, shore up some of that level of trust among kind of those older cohorts where they're interacting with financial institutions a lot more. And this, there's an avenue to do that through financial advisors, through other folks that are much more engaged and know kind of the individual circumstances of some of these folks when they come into a bank looking for advice, looking to do something with their money or their investments. And speaking of investments, one of the things that we do notice with young people is that they are taking a much more kind of diversified approach to investing. And so kind of what does that look like? We asked the question, of the following types: savings, investments, investment products, which do you have? So, looking at this, young Canadians aren't really parking their money in one savings or investment vehicle. It's kind of a mixed bag here. We got TFSAs and RRSPs, stocks in there, and kind of a mix between real estate, virtual currency, so that kind of cryptocurrency aspect, and other investments as well. And it's interesting to know kind of the demographic differences. If we recall back to when we were talking about, do you have enough knowledge to make good financial decisions? Women were less likely to say yes, like I'm comfortable enough, I have enough, everything I need to be able to do that. Men are the ones here that are more likely to be invested in at least one savings. So thinking about all of these in this list, but also kind of virtual currencies, heavily kind of focused within men, more likely to be involved in stocks or bonds on the stock market themselves. So themselves kind of managing their own investments. So the behavior here is kind of really different, kind of on the gender lines, also along kind of age cohort lines as well. But it's important to kind of look at the fact that this diversified approach is almost here to stay. Some of the stuff that we're seeing that is growing among young Canadians, primarily in the kind of crypto space, is a year-over-year kind of growth as this becomes more mainstream, as folks learn a little bit more about kind of that asset class. Younger Canadians are being more likely to be drawn into that. Real estate still an important piece, but kind of as Allan was talking about, a lot of concerns about the affordability of that. Young people definitely feeling the pinch in terms of trying to get into that market. So that's where something like virtual currencies, maybe investing on your own via stocks, are a lot more palatable because they're ways that folks can, feel like they're taking control of their kind of financial future. And there is a desire to be more self-sufficient. So we asked a bunch of kind of statements, yes or no. Where do young people fall along these lines? People agreeing that it's better to be independent when managing your investments. 40% saying that managing their personal finances is an activity that they actually enjoy doing. There's also other elements related to that, things like being interested in using mobile apps as part of their kind of financial decision making. And, a third or so kind of are actively involved in looking at the market and determining what else is out there, what kind of competition exists, am I getting the best services? So when we think about kind of some of the traditional institutions, so your standard banks versus some of the more digital focused, digital first financial institution offerings out there, this is kind of an avenue where young people are, digital first minded. These new kind of financial institutions that are emerging that really are focused on providing an all digital experience have a lot to gain as a result of this, because with young people, just, I want to be in control of where my money is going. I want to dictate where my investments is going. Those digital institutions are well positioned to be able to capitalize that, as long as they offer a medium that allows for ease of use in terms of ensuring that young people can have that full greater control. There's also kind of important here to note, when we're thinking back to that knowledge gap, that educational element. Obviously, everyone's half are agreeing here, saying it's better to be independent when managing their money, but kind of do they know what goes into that? What is the knowledge gap that folks have on the available products that are out there, investment strategies, if they're going to self-direct their investment portfolio. Do young people have the tools to be successful in doing kind of a more self-sufficient investment strategy or independent investment strategy from kind of a financial advisor? That's where banks still, or financial institutions as well, still have that competitive advantage. You know, there's a full suite of expertise that they can offer to young people, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a situation where you are, you know, have an active advisor necessarily with them. It could be a suite of educational resources that are provided to them. Maybe they have the option of kind of, you know, in a live chat, digitally talking to an advisor online to, you know, get information maybe about a specific product or service. Implementing those kind of things where it's at their fingertips, they're able to get the information that they want, allows, you know, financial institutions to capitalize on the opportunities that exist in terms of being kind of that partner in the success of the financial future of young Canadians. So there's a lot of opportunities here, I think, in that will help shore up some of the scores that we're seeing with financial institutions, but also opportunities as well to kind of reimagine themselves and engage with proactively with young Canadians on the financial decisions that they're making. So all of this kind of boils down into 5 different profiles that kind of came out from the data, and each has their own kind of unique circumstances and demographics that make their behavior a little bit different. And I want to walk through some of them here to help you kind of understand what we're seeing within young people in terms of the financial segments that have emerged. So start one by one here. We'll go kind of the first group here, that informed and interested folks. So these are folks that, you know, have a fair and strong degree of confidence in banks. They're inclined to kind of put money aside, feel that personal finances is normal. You know, when seeking financial advice, they primarily go with a financial advisor. And that isn't surprising, right? If you have a high level of confidence in banks, you're more likely to be engaged with kind of their own kind of institutions and advisory arm. These are more likely to be men. When we're thinking about kind of the age cohorts that we've surveyed, Gen Z versus millennials, more likely to be millennials, employed, university educated, homeowner. Second group are the worried and forward thinking. You know, they have a pretty strong degree of confidence in banks, and they just don't see kind of that, you know, managing their personal finances as an enjoyable task, but they will put money aside. You know, one of the things here is that who they're going to for advice, more likely to be turning to their parents. From a demographic standpoint, this group more likely to be women, kind of students, university educated, or living with their parents or tenants. So not quite yet at that homeowner kind of level there, and they're more likely to be younger, the Gen Z group. Number 3, kind of the disinterested, and kind of this is kind of at the bottom in terms of the overall percentage of the sample that we had in this survey. So 8% of young people kind of fall into this group. You know, these folks, you know, they have, you know, a degree of confidence in the banks, but, you know, they're just really not interested in what goes into personal finance, decision making, budgeting. And that's why kind of they're not always making kind of, you know, they're not making decisions kind of with their finances in mind. Who are these folks? Again, younger, more likely to be women, students, and they also have kind of just maybe a high school level or maybe a little bit of college level of education, living with their parents. Group number 4, the worried and the suspicious. This is where we start getting into the groups who, you know, are a little bit skeptical about the offers from financial institutions. They have kind of little or no confidence in banks. They really don't like kind of, you know, what goes into personal finance. And when they're seeking financial advice, they're more likely to turn to kind of a bunch of different sources. So parents, life partners, financial advisors. I think that builds into that kind of worried and suspicious thing. They're not going to take one source of information as the be all end all. They're going to kind of source out a little bit more before they kind of make decision making. Make a decision with their finances. In terms of the demographics that kind of go into this group, I mean, it's kind of even split between men and women, but more likely to be millennials, more likely to be kind of in that self-employed or maybe freelance kind of line of work. Education-wise, college or, pre-university or technical programs, and they're more likely to be renters. So these are folks who are kind of moved out of their parents' home and kind of off trying to make financial decisions on their own and be a little bit more independent. And I think that is kind of what's baked into that worriedness, suspicion kind of aspect behind this group, is that, they're trying to navigate kind of, as Allan was outlining, a significant amount of economic uncertainty, and they're just trying to keep their head above water here. The last group is the confident, enthusiastic, and like these are folks who are like gung-ho. They have absolutely no problem with banks, high level of confidence. They love managing their money. Personal finances are in tip-top shape. In terms of who they're seeking advice from parents or life partners, maybe they're not turning to financial advisors, and part of the reason that might be is because they feel that they have enough financial kind of knowledge. They feel like they've got all their bases covered. So demographically, who does that look like? Men, Gen Z, those working full time, somebody with a kind of a college degree or university or higher, something like that. Also homeowners. So I think one of the key pieces here when we're looking at these 5 groups is that home ownership status really is one that brings people a little bit more to be interested in their own personal finances, but also gives them a little bit more confidence kind of in banks as well. They're also more likely to say, I've got my finances my financial house in order and sorted. So one of the key takeaways there for me is, seeing that kind of similarity between groups 1 and 5. 2, 3, and 4, when we're looking at that, these are over, that underscores all 3 of these groups, is this kind of, tiptoeing around this whole economic situation that's in the news, inflation, possible recession. People are trying to look forward, especially with group 2, they're trying to plan for the future. How can you plan for the future when all of this noise is out there in the news about the coming economic recession? So I think that is a little bit in each of these 2, 3, and 4, these 3 groups here, in terms of what underscores or ties them together. So that kind of brings us to kind of the segmentation part of it, and brings us to the end of some of what we've seen in the data here. And we're going to open it up to some questions and answers, and I'll go to that as well. So let me just bring that up. And so we'll go through some of the questions that were in the chat. So if anybody has any additional questions that they want to throw out there, we can definitely take a look. Just thinking ahead to kind of the 2 other webinars that we've got coming up. We have on December 7th, kind of a webinar that's focused on the future, but also as well as a webinar focused on Gen Z and millennials as it pertains to employment. So one of the questions here, we've just passed Giving Tuesday. How does kind of general pessimism from Gen Z and millennials regarding their finances impact kind of their likelihood to donate or engage in kind of philanthropy?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any specific questions about that, but I think we can infer that given just under half are saying that they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they're having to make concessions in the areas of savings and food, budget. It's impacting their ability to pay credit cards regularly, and for some, their ability to pay mortgage and rent. That it would impact their ability to donate. But in terms of specific questions around that donation and philanthropy, we can just make that inference, but we don't have a specific percentage to cite for that.
Yeah, and I think that it almost is a kind of an individual circumstance. If we think back to those groups that we presented at the end, certainly I would say that those who are feeling a little bit more confident are probably more likely to feel that, you know, I have a little bit of room and at the end of my month to give to charity. Again, we just passed Giving Tuesday, you know, major holiday season is also around the corner as well. So these groups may feel and may have the ability to give a little bit more. So I think it depends where you are kind of in that life stage for young people when thinking about kind of giving and donations to charity and how that factors into their own financial planning. We've got another question here. Are Gen Z and millennials willing to work more to earn more money?
And that we do have some data on. I was looking through, and 18% are say that they're working a second job in order to meet ends meet. So definitely, you know, about 1 in 5 saying that they're going above and beyond their 9 to 5 job to be able to earn more money and meet the demands of inflation and rising costs.
Yeah. So we have some data on that kind of helps kind of get to that point about you know, some of these age groups kind of feeling the need to be able to find extra money. One question here, and I think I can take this one in terms of what does that mean in terms of it's better to be independent when managing your investments. You know, we were thinking back to that question where folks were indicating, you know, how likely are you to agree with these statements? So I don't think it means that, you know, there isn't a role for kind of an advisor type relationship. I think it mainly means that, you know, they do want to have a sense of control over kind of where they're investing and where their money is going. And, you know, thinking back to that knowledge piece where only 54% feel that they have financial knowledge to make good decisions, you know, there's a significant room there for financial institutions to step in and say, hey, you know, we can be a partner in your financial success. We can provide the resources for you to help make better decisions, right? Financial advisors, you know, play a significant role in that, in ensuring that their clients and consumers know that what they're getting into in a financial investment, what the risks are, what the rewards are, and how that might factor into their, you know, long-term financial planning. So I think it's just mainly having this feeling of, you know, I'm in the driver's seat of my own success, but that doesn't mean that I don't want, you know, a passenger beside me, making sure I'm on, you know, the correct road that I need to be on in my destination. So I think there is a significant room for advisors, and it's about, you know, envisioning kind of financial institutions and positioning yourself as a partner in that success rather than just providing kind of a service, is mainly, I think, where kind of that agreement is coming from in terms of that feeling of, you know, wanting to be independent and managing your investments. Another question here, kind of, are they more self-taught in terms of learning about their finances? So is it like going to YouTube, maybe social media influencers, kind of where are they getting that information from?
Well, definitely. I mean, we see that there is a segment of the population who are actively going out there and learning from these different and I would expect learning from these different resources. Some enjoy doing that. So, you know, for those particular segments, I would say they would be doing that. We don't have specific data to support it, but just given their interest in the finances and their desire to have control and look at what different financial products are offered by financial institutions, I would imagine that's the case.
Yeah. One of the questions too here is kind of about kind of the sharing economy and how that kind of factors into everything. So question here, you know, general perception that youth prefer the sharing economy and they're not really into ownership. So an aspiration, like, do they want to own a house in the future? What about, you know, other luxuries, maybe owning a car, stuff like that? Is that still top of mind for young people, or is it, you know, the sharing economy has kind of leveled that a little bit?
I definitely think home ownership is an aspiration for many. Definitely not all. When we were looking at the results in terms of what people are saving for, those who are able to save, it was about, I think, 2/3 who were saying that they would the reason why they're not buying a house is because they can't afford it. It's not because they don't want to do it. It's because of the affordability aspect. And the challenge is that, and we see through renters, is they're not able to get ahead. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're kind of getting deeper and deeper into the or many of them are getting deeper and deeper into the hole, into a gap where they just can't make the initial investment in home ownership.
Additional question here about, how much of this is just, a factor of the aging trend as, you hit certain life milestones, you have to make certain financial decisions. Is there anything that's maybe different about millennials and Gen Z that we might have not seen kind of with Gen X and boomers in kind of how they're kind of aging? Is there any kind of factors that maybe changing kind of the experiences if we were to compare where Gen X kind of was in when they were this age, or boomers when they were this age, versus millennials and Gen Z as they currently are now?
Well, I can't speak to how it was for Gen X, but I mean, we definitely see the perception that it's different. We see that amongst millennials and Gen Z, they do feel that they are very different, or many of them feel that they are in a different state of the world, that they're not. I think it was about 40% saying that they believe that, or even more, saying that they believe that they're not going to be as affluent or as well off as their parents' generation were. So there's an aspirational look at the older generations and saying, well, they have it perhaps easier, and that has influence their day-to-day life. We see that it's causing them to want to live more in the moment and more present, because they just can't project what the future is. There's been so much change over the past few years and over their lifetime, that they're just saying, well, or a good portion of them are saying, well, yeah, I'm just gonna perhaps just focus on what I can control in this day and age, and go from there.
Yeah, and I think one of the areas where this is most pronounced is probably housing, right? When we think about boomers and kind of Gen X, like obviously the kind of houses that they were able to afford, Gen Z and millennials have to work a little bit harder to kind of get that 20% down payment cobbled together. So certainly that factors into kind of how they move in their aging trend. Maybe taking out a few more jobs. Maybe it's living at home for 6, 7, 8 more years to be able to get that nest egg shored up and healthy for that down payment. So, many people, as Allan was kind of saying, have opted to, live in the moment. When they look at kind of what's needed for some of these big ticket items, it can seem daunting. Some folks are like, well, you know what, I'm going to go take that vacation. I'm going to go, out with my friends. I'm going to go experience life rather than trying to chase something that feels like it's less and less kind of attainable, even though it's such a big aspiration for this age cohort. Couple of other questions here. Did we see any kind of major differences across the country, kind of regionally on some of these metrics?
Regionally, I was just trying to take a quick look. I know the full report will have the data segmented regionally, and we can it will make for a good read in terms of the insights there. We did see that in terms of those who are talking about their state of affairs, the percentage who say that they're in bad shape or their personal finances are in bad shape, that tended to be higher outside of the Quebec market, and many of those other differences will be highlighted within the larger report.
And then also kind of any other data on maybe just comparing traditional institutions, like overall, without like kind of specific kind of banks mentioned versus digital institutions. I don't think we had any kind of specific data around that point.
No, I don't believe so as
No,
well.
no, I think mainly that finding when we talk about kind of what young people are looking for, it's really in that aspect of offering kind of that digital platform. I mean, it shouldn't be really a surprise that many young people are digital first. They want it now on their phone in the palm of their hand, and delaying that certainly isn't something that young people are too kind of fond at in terms of when looking for information and trying to engage with institutions. So having that access to your finances at your fingertips is certainly very important, but certainly something we can dive into in future studies, looking at the differences between those digital institutions and traditional institutions. Kind of last question here that we got related to thinking about whether this trust in institutions will rebound, kind of with Gen Z and millennials, I guess, young people overall, because we're kind of seeing this trend kind of year over year, kind of the decline. Like, is this something that we expect to rebound, like, or is this something that is going to continue slowly eroding?
I mean, definitely the trend is showing erosion, but I mean, as you've highlighted, there are opportunities for financial institutions in particular to build back trust. And it does seem like there is a desire amongst these segments to, and they've identified opportunities to become more partners in the process. And so, I don't have a crystal ball in terms of projecting. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen next week versus next year, but I would say that there is more so just focus on the opportunity to build trust. And I mean, taking world events out of play, thinking that as a specific institution, a specific organization, there are certainly things that can be done to build in trust in your specific brand or institution.
Yeah, I think that's it. In a couple of questions here, just kind of an overall, I think total number was surveyed was a 3,000.
Yeah.
Among kind of Gen Z and millennials. So kind of a sizable proportion there. But if there are no additional questions, just some kind of housekeeping items here. So the recording will be available kind of after the webinar today, so you'll have access to that. And the full report, kind of once all three, because there's a webinar series, we're doing kind of 2 others. Once all 3 have been completed, that full report will be available for everybody.
And with that, we just would like to thank everybody for their participation today. As mentioned, shown here, if you would like a specific presentation, feel free to email us. We'd be happy to hop on. There is lots of other data available, so encourage you to watch the other 2 webinars, get the full picture of the youth landscape, and review the report, and encourage questions as they come up.